The September issue of Exceptional Parent magazine focuses on the elderly and those who care for them. Sign up for free and read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Hi, baby. I'm back. You see, I only replace her. I replace you so you can play Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Really good.
Where's Dad?
I'm your daddy now.
Oh. Hello, Daddy.
I like that.
Mittens is stuck again.
Mittens, you did this to yourself.
Sir, can you please just unlock the doors?
Just give me 5 stars. Now get the hell out of my car. Tacos, anyone? No! Blessings and gifts for all.
Your Holiness!
Kiss your own baby, lady. Bim, 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 bless. Call of Duty Black Ops is back.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, 2 Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. 2 Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, 2 lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention. Suicide is complex. There is no single cause, and it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military. Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not. If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available. There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis. Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay. Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company, thank you, Travis Arnold, and Exceptional Parent Magazine, Faye Simon, Editor-in-Chief, thank you for believing in me. Again, folks, again, the theme for Oscar Mike Radio in 2025 has been relationships. You know, how you start relationships, develop relationships, and a podcast is a really cool way to do that. And I'm really excited And Joel Hunt, H Train, will be excited too, because I have a fellow MBR host on, military broadcast radio host on, in the MBR family, a medical veteran, well, not veteran, you're active duty right now, and host of her own podcast, the Dog Tag Diva Podcast. I'm so excited. Ma'am, Kristin Leon, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Thank you so much for having me on, Travis. I'm excited to be here with you today.
It is like been a long time coming. You know, we got on MBR and you know, I've been doing my thing, and I started seeing you all get dialed in, and Joel's done a great job. And I'm like, I want to talk to all these amazing hosts on, you know, this platform that's been created. And then I'm like, she's medical. So we're just going to, before we get into your backstory, whatever, I have the question I ask all Navy corpsmen and medical people, because, you know, as a Marine, I hate shots. And so I try to make sure I make sure I don't get shots at all, or as little as possible. So
Right.
I have been told, you know, let me set the stages. It's back in the 90s, Camp Pendleton, you know, we're on Liberty, the little, you know, E1s and E2s. We're just doing our thing. And this Navy corpsman comes up to us and says, you know, Marines, you want to know the secret to long life and health? And we're like, well, yes, corpsman. He's like, the clean socks thing is no BS. You must have extra socks in your Alice pack. And then, you know, make sure you get your Motrin, you know, game squared away. You know, Motrin is the key to dealing with inflammation. Inflammation's bad for the body. And he's like, the last thing is truly a gallon of water a day. So he's like, Marines, you got clean socks every day for your feet. You got Motrin for inflammation, and you have a gallon of water to flush your system. You will be healthy as a horse the rest of your life. Now, as a medical professional, Kristin, who's been trained and gone to war college, do you agree with that sentiment?
I would agree with most of it. You know, water is always good. Soda is not good for you. And ladies, just so you know, soda causes cellulite, so stay away from the soda. And yes, clean socks, keeping your feet clean, taking care of your feet. As someone who did a medical, like an obstacle course, stretcher litter in like chest deep water and wound up with athlete's foot, yes, clean socks are a must as well. Motrin's not bad, just don't overdo it on the Motrin.
Ah, okay. I can, because I'm trying to avoid shots, Kristin, because that is just a bad time for me. I don't understand it, but I hate them with every. So if I gotta drink a gallon of water a day to avoid shots, I'm gonna do it.
Well, there's certain things that our body just needs, you know, especially as we're aging. You know, I'm almost 50, you know, I'm in that, you know, I maybe need to be thinking about the pneumococcal vaccine and the shingles vaccine. So there's certain vaccines that we need to think about. There are definitely techniques that other people can do that administer the shot, so it's less painful. And I teach that to my students, but some things we just can't avoid.
Well, back in the day, there's no tenderness there. It was the freaking gun and bam, bam, bam.
Yeah, we don't have I have not seen the gun ever anymore, but there's definitely techniques that you can do so it's not like jamming into your arm and scaring the bejesus out of you.
All right, all right. So you're growing up, you're going through life, and you decide to join the United States Navy. How did that come to be, Kristin?
That's an interesting question. That's a great question. So I actually have my grandfather served on the USS Stockton in the Navy in World War II. And then I have two uncles. One was in the Air Force and one was in the Army during World War II. So my uncle was Air Force, and then he was Air National Guard. So the family history was there. I graduated college with my nursing degree and worked for probably about 10 or 12 years before I decided I was bored and I needed more in my life and I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to carry on the family tradition of serving, and the idea of being the first woman in my family to serve really appealed to me. And I, talked to a recruiter. Actually, I talked to a couple of different recruiters. I talked to Navy and Army recruiters, and the Navy seemed to fit me best. And I started the process, and I believe it took 6 or 7 months from start to finish before I was officially sworn in to the Navy as a lieutenant junior grade, because I came in with a degree and experience. So 2010, by that point, I had been a nurse about 12 years at that point when I joined the service. So, and I was 35. So I was, it was a late bloomer, but it just took me a bit to get there. But I have no regrets.
So what's it like? I mean, because we had a guy in Hawk School who was like, you know, in his 30s, and it was not a fun ride for him, ma'am. It was Kristen. It was not a fun ride for him. And part of the thing is we're all like, 19, 20, 21, acting like young dudes, and he had to put up with that. How was it like being like the den mother big sister in that time of your life?
It wasn't that bad
Yeah.
because the good thing about being in the reserves, and at the time, officer school was only 2 weeks. So we went up to Newport, Rhode Island for 2 weeks to do our training, and we were all of varied backgrounds. A lot of us were coming into the service for the first time. Some of us were transitioning from active to reserve, but most of us were coming into the service for the first time, and we were officers. So a lot of us came with degrees and a level of maturity that we didn't have to deal with. But again, I'm 30, I was 35 at the time, and we were getting up at 04:30 every morning because we PT'd every morning, and it was dark. And October in Newport, Rhode Island is chilly, as I'm sure you're aware, being up in Massachusetts. So it was a little cold. So it was a struggle some days, and it was tiring. And then you're, death by PowerPoint because you're sitting in lectures all day long. And but you really kind of learn that team mentality, and either all the jackets are on or all the jackets are off, and if you're tired you go stand in the back, you don't sit and fall asleep, or there will be hell to pay. But being older, more mature, that I look out for some of the younger folks, absolutely. But I've been on field exercises where I am older and I'm among some 19, 20, 21 year olds, and they're falling out of the ruck, and you're like, oh my God, how am I going to manage this ruck? And these young kids are falling out. And one of the guys was like, probably because they're hungover. That's why they're falling out. I'm like, okay, like, I'm sober. I should be okay. But it's a little intimidating.
But tell me this, like I'm not an officer. I was a terminal lance, not a bad Marine, just situation. We'll get in that later. But I see the image, right? Or the video where the officers pin for the first time and they do the salute, and it hits them, regardless of what service, that wow, this is for real now. And I always wonder, like, what was that like for you when you realized you are truly an officer in the United States Navy?
It was kind of surreal because, I was drilling for several months before, probably close to a year before I actually went away to officer school. And, I came in with no experience into the service. And it was, am I going to salute the right person? Am I going to get yelled at? Wear the uniform correctly? This is a lot of pressure. And there's an expectation when you come in as an officer to perform at a certain level. And so I wanted to make sure I was doing right by myself and my family and my country. So then you get to officer school and you see all the things that you have to learn. And it's a lot of pressure, and you just want to look and be your best all the time. And you're standing in formation and they're doing uniform inspection, and all you're hearing is like, oh, gear drift, gear, and people are getting dinged left and right, and you're worried about getting liberty. And so you're really not even, grasping the magnitude of what happens until they, officially put you in formation and call you to attention, and then make you take the oath, and then you're like, wow, okay, like this is real. And now I'm an officer in the United States Navy. And you're amongst your class members, and we've spent 2 weeks together, and really kind of a neat moment. Just wishing that it had been more of a bigger celebration. I think active duty side, they have a big celebration. But from the reserve side of the house, there was no like, oh, invite your families and, come to, graduation, so to speak. We just had our own little class graduation. And then, they gave us our certificates, and on our way, we went. I felt a bigger magnitude when I actually got the call to deploy and to Afghanistan in 2015. And a cousin of mine had, wrote me like a letter, like, good luck. I know you're going to do great things. Be ready to take your place in history as a woman serving your country and, as an officer. And I was like, that's one of the moment that really
Yeah.
kind of hit me that, wow, okay. Now it's really, things are, the shit is real now, so to speak.
Well, you're a reservist, one, you're a woman, two, and you're working full time as a nurse. What was that like trying to go, well, you had to, you've done it, but you're going from, hey, I'm a nurse at a hospital to, oh, I gotta do, be a military person. And, reservists get laughed at sometimes, but the way I see it is you wear the same uniform we do. You got to perform at the same level. What's it like making that switch like that? Because the weekend comes and you've got to be ready to go.
Yeah, so the weekend comes and and right now I live in Clearwater, Florida, and I drill out of Orlando. I'm actually the officer in charge of the medical unit out of Orlando. And I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I drive an hour and a half to Orlando and I, drill all weekend and then I drive 2 hours home with the traffic. And I enjoy my drill weekends because I like my unit. I have a good group of people, and I enjoy mentoring and leading my junior officers and my enlisted folks, and assisting the physicians and the NRC. And we've got good leadership at the NRC where I am, and I try to emulate Admiral Gilday, who is now retired. Started an initiative a couple years ago called Get Real, Get Better, and basically he tasked all of us who serve in the Navy to take a look at ourselves and say, periodically check in with ourselves and our units. What can I be doing better? How can I improve? Because none of us are perfect. And I really try to embrace that. And then you go away for your 2 weeks and you're on active duty for 2 weeks, and then you come back to the civilian side. So I find it easy to prep going, and I find it hard to reacclimate when I come home, because active duty, when you're on drill weekends or when you're doing your active duty, time, it's, there's this chain of command that just happens, that doesn't happen in civilian side. There's kind of an understanding in terms of tasks and jobs and things that are going to get done that you just don't get in the civilian side. So I don't have a problem going to drill or going to do my 2 weeks. My struggle comes for sure when I come home from my 2 weeks and I'm like, ugh, now I got to go back in the civilian world.
Well, I can kind of commiserate a little bit. I'm the black sheep of the family. I did not go into the medical professions, but I have a lot of family members who have, and it can be a challenging world to get your colleagues to march in the same direction, so to speak.
Yeah, when we were at officer school, I had never marched in formation. I mean, I had done sports my whole life, so I was always used to being part of a team and wearing things a certain way and being, a part of the group and toeing the line, and so that wasn't the hard part. It was just, blending all of our backgrounds, and this is how it's got to be now, because it's literally, life or death when it comes to, if you're called to serve in a forward deployed situation, especially from a medical perspective. So I had a basic foundation. I had been a nurse for 12 years before I joined the service, and I had a lot of training. And then I joined the military and I got even more training. So I definitely have skills that civilian nurses don't have, which I love and I relish in. But it's a little bit daunting too, because there's an expectation level of we have to be able to perform this at this level and keep up our training. So it's just a lot to undertake, being working full time as a civilian, then you're a drilling reservist and maintaining all the credentials that you have to maintain, and oh, by the way, do your mandatory GMTs, and and especially now that I'm an officer in charge, it's making sure everybody is squared away, and managing administrative tasks and things. So it's not really just 1 weekend a month. Initially, when you join, yes, it's 1 weekend a month, but the higher in rank you go, the more responsibility you take on, and the more things that you're handling and juggling. So you have to find the balance.
Well, speaking of balance, I mean, there is that challenge just in normal life, and you've gone over to Afghanistan and served there. What was that like?
It was interesting.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I mean, I was terrified before I went. And part of that came from, A friend of mine that I trained with, because I studied Taekwondo for many, many years. And one of the gentlemen that I had trained with, he was a West Point grad, and he had gotten deployed to Afghanistan 5 years before me, and he was killed in an IED attack. And he was a big, strong guy. He was a West Point grad, and he was just amazing. And I was like, okay, if he got killed, what chance do I even stand myself at? Like, I'm 5'3", 130 pounds, and I'm a nurse. Like, what, so I was very concerned about going over. The medical stuff I knew I was going to be able to handle. We had a lot of we had combat training before we went over, which generally I liked. I had no problem with being out in the fields and blowing things up, and the convoy training and being out on the range. I generally, and kicking indoors, I love that shit. Like, I would do that all day. So getting extra medical training was great. But once you're there, I don't know if there's any really way to prepare to go into a forward deployed situation. Yes, you build a foundation, but I don't know if there's really a way to, truly understand, the ramification and the environment that you're going into. I knew it was going to be dusty. I knew it was going to be hot. I was worried about the food, but I knew there was a gym, so I knew there was a good chance I was going to come home in the best shape of my life. Because, when you're forward deployed, there's not a lot to do. I was lucky that we were, I was there at a time when we at least had Wi-Fi, so I could, we had access to Netflix, and, we had WhatsApp and Skype and Facebook video messenger. So we were able to stay connected to our loved ones back home. And we had the USO who had phones. And they also had gaming systems and things at the USO. So there's a way for it to stay connected and stay distracted. I did a lot of reading and did a lot of working out when I wasn't at the hospital. We were in Kandahar. We were about, I think, 8.5 hours ahead of the East Coast. And I was on night shift the first half of my deployment at the Roll 3 hospital over there. So it actually worked out better because I was able to communicate and talk with my family, because, if I was at work at midnight, my son was coming home from school, so I could call him and maintain that connection. So actually got a little harder to connect with my family once I flipped to day shift halfway through the deployment, because of the time difference.
Yeah.
And it made it a little bit easier to kind of deal with the situation going on around us, because I was able to stay connected to home. I imagine, before we had all the technology, it was probably much harder for people, obviously, to maintain those connections and not to get, caught up and spun up in your own head. We had a pager, so anytime there was injuries, the pager would go off, and we would all just convene if it wasn't a regular shift for us. We had to get used, when you work civilian and hospitals in Philadelphia, you got all the latest tech, and then you're in a forward deployed situation. Now you have to make do with whatever you have. So that, and that was fine. I don't like the tech. I don't need the tech. It's nice to have, but I don't need it. I came up as a baby nurse without all the techs. I preferred the least tech stuff available to me. And we just kind of made do. It was odd for sure for me as a nurse on my first shift, assessing my first patient. And I was leaning over to listen to my patients, lung sounds and heart sounds in my stethoscope. And I stood up and I was stuck, and I couldn't figure out what I was stuck on. And here it was my sidearm. My gun had gotten stuck in the side rail of the bed. And I'm like, okay, well, here's a new experience I wouldn't have back home. My God. So, you get used to, that becomes your new normal.
Well, educate me here on something, because when I hear Navy nurse, naval medicine, I know that there's naval hospitals here in the U.S., right? We go from, Yuma to Balboa for the big naval hospital there. But when I hear Navy, naval nursing support, I'm thinking you all are on destroyers or battle cruisers or aircraft carriers or hospital ships off the coast of wherever, taking care of people. Not what I'm trying to say is, Kristin, is I would think that the Army would be the one supplying the majority of the on-field medical care for soldiers, and the Air Force has their own medical arms. So why do they put the Navy on a ground-based hospital in a forward combat zone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we had nurses kind of all over the place over there, and we were in Afghanistan, just about 20 years. So we were just, we were just part of the cycle. And in the early phases of the war, I believe that was a shared responsibility. The Air Force had their CCAT team, like the critical care transport team. Um, so there was a lot of medicine involved, and nurses generally aren't on the destroyers. That's the corpsmen. So the corpsmen really have to be trained up and well and ready to
Wow.
go because the nurses aren't there. On the hospital ships, absolutely, yes. When they go out on their missions, the Mercy is on the West Coast and the Comfort is on the East Coast. And the Mercy is getting ready to go out on their next mission soon in the next couple months. But yeah, so generally you're going to see the nurses on the bigger, larger ships, and you're going to see them in the naval hospitals as well. But the smaller ships, definitely not. That's for the corpsmen as well. And one of the things from a Navy side of the house is that we learned from Iraq and Afghanistan is that we actually left too big of a footprint with our solid structure medical services. So in Navy medicine has actually come up with a plan and they are actually breaking down the bigger units into smaller units as we prepared for potential war with a near peer adversary. And they've kind of mentally prepared us for, should we go to war with a near peer, it's likely that we will be seeing World War II level casualties because we're not going to have places to evacuate to like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. In medicine, we talk about the golden hour to get, from, point of injury to point of treatment. And we were able to do that in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is why our survival rate was so high.
Right.
If we, near peer adversary, this time around, we're going to be back to, maritime war, and we're definitely going to be seeing higher levels of casualties because of that. But Navy's preparing and making smaller units that are more mobile and can get in and do what they got to do and get out. And we're going to do the best that we can for, what the resources that we have.
Well, I think people don't understand. It's not like, hey, I get an owie, I can just come into the ER or CVS, priority
Minute
care,
Clinic.
minute clinic, and get
Yeah.
taken care of. Well, I mean, just for me in Yuma, we'd go out in the field. We'd be 2 hours away from the nearest hospital, and so the corpsman became your best friend. Like you needed him to survive if you got hurt. It was just, and so the training was very dialed in. Like they took their job pretty seriously, which was nice to see. You're doing so. You're like in the midst of this. Like usually, I talk to a lot of people who are out of the military. I think you're the second or third person who's actually been serving reserve or active duty. And the last person I talked to was an officer. So this is a trend. This is nice. Well, that is to say that, it's a different kind of military experience,
Yeah.
And there's different things that you're seeing because you're doing it right now.
Right.
And you've been in for what, 13, 15 years?
13 years. Yeah.
Are you going to be one of those doing your full 30, Kristin?
I'm going to do the 20. I don't know that I'll make 30, but I do the 20. Yes. The plan is to do the 20 and, hit the retirement. And, but yeah, it's, I'm getting older and I'm a nurse. So I have a desk job now, but I still pick up shifts once a month because we have to maintain a certain amount of hours per year in order to maintain our credentials. So I'm still clinical. Once a month, I'm doing a 12-hour shift. And, when I go do my 2 weeks of active duty at Balboa Naval Hospital in the ICU, I'm doing 12-hour shifts like everybody else. And, I'm aging.
Well, I mean, that's what I was told. You get these people coming in, you got to wrestle with them. You get the doctors not following the protocol. Doctors calling their own audibles with medical care. Is just all I'm going to say. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
And then I don't think people realize just how physical it is.
Yeah, it's very physical. Being on your feet for 12 hours is long, especially when you're in the intensive care unit like I am, and you're lifting and turning, and you got multiple drips that are trying to keeping a patient alive and managing those drips and titrating per orders, and making sure if the patient's on an epinephrine drip to maintain their heart rate, you have to make sure that you have an extra standing by when it's ready to almost empty, so you can quick change and hopefully the blood pressure doesn't plummet and your patient doesn't go into cardiac arrest in that, 30 seconds it takes you to swap out the empty for a new full one, and managing a ventilator, and, you're managing a care team of, patient comes in with, a trauma, that's one thing, but then we also may need nutrition. We're going to need respiratory. We're going to need, we may need plastic surgery involved with, dealing with their wounds. And so we're kind of like a liaison with the, medical team, depending on how many issues a patient has. So 12 hours is a long time. And
Yeah.
then, if you're doing 3 shifts a week, which I am not, but I did it up until very recently. Up until 2 years ago, I was still doing, 2, 3, 12-hour shifts a week. And it's a lot. Physically and mentally, it's a lot. And you're right, like you said, socially, it's the general public used to have a really lovely perception of nurses. And it seems since the pandemic, that frame that has changed. The vision of how we're perceived has changed. And the general public has kind of lost their damn minds. Workplace violence is on the rise for sure. And so it's a challenge to, keep your own safety. It's not just, bend with your knees and not with your back. Now it's, depending on the patient, sometimes we're dodging fists and legs, and or family members are getting irate. And, there's plenty of hospitals around the country that have metal detectors when people walk in. Some do, some don't. But there are a lot that do, and because just violence is on the rise. The ER sees it, I think the most. ICU is not that far behind. We have a lot of patients with co-occurring, disorders. It's not uncommon for, diabetics and cardiac and respiratory patients to also have, schizophrenia or depression or, bipolar or, something along those lines. So we're dealing with, addicts. God bless the addicts. I wish there was a magic cure, but manipulation of, who's drug seeking. And, I carry Narcan in my purse with me, God forbid I ever come across somebody that needs some Narcan.
Well, there's all those variables into it, just trying to go to work. And, you've got, people in certain, if the coffee isn't just right, they're willing to walk out the door. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I went to work today. And, one of my lady friends is telling me, hearing her husband talk about it, she went to work and it wasn't some big 300-pound guy. It was a little 5'1", 5'2" woman, a buck 10, who absolutely took the security team to the mat. They let their guard down, and some mental incident happened. It was really something else. So you're doing all this, and that's a lot. And then you decide, Kristin, to create a podcast.
Yeah.
And we're both podcasters, but I'm always interested in, especially for us veterans and active duty people, what prompts you to say, you know what, I'm not doing enough. I want to do this too.
I want to do more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always tended to be a busy person. Even since I was a kid, I was always involved in multiple things. Like I'm just not happy unless I'm running around my hair on fire. And when I lived in New Jersey, I had my own TV show and I loved it. And it was a lot of fun. And it was easier because I just showed up and looked pretty and they did everything around me. And, the pandemic really kind of sucked a lot of my energy and my mojo. And I went to broadcasting school because the hope is to one day become a medical journalist, medical reporter, health reporter. And there's no TV studios around here to recreate my TV show. And I follow a lot of veteran sites down here because I'd like to stay connected to the veteran community, and I like to advocate, I like to be a veteran advocate as much as I possibly can. And found military broadcast radio somehow, I don't even remember how, and saw, a post about like, oh, have you ever wanted to be a podcaster? Let us know. And I didn't know how formal or how much experience they needed to be. So I sent this very professional message to, to Joel, and he was like, oh, hey, you're in. And I'm like, no, like interview, like, no, like this isn't an interview. If you want to do it, you can do it and we'll give you training and stuff. And I said, oh, great. Because, the tech is a bit of a struggle for me. And so he, taught me a lot. Joel, I connected and, we kind of, he showed me just he started out by having me on his show just to kind of get used to the podcasting world. And then he, after lessons and I felt comfortable enough, I, formed my own podcast. So, the mission of my TV show when I was in New Jersey was to educate, motivate, and inspire. And I figured there's no reason why I can't carry that mission forward and just into a new format. Because I don't want to pigeonhole myself to just one thing. I want to be able to do all the things and, not just appeal to veterans. I want to be able to appeal to everybody and help as many people as I can. And I guess it's just the nurse in me. I want to take care of everybody. But like I said, I carried that mission of education, motivation, and inspiration so that I could do the most good for the most people. And that's where the Dog Tag Diva was born.
You said the Dog Tag Diva. Now, first of all, let's go back a little bit. What was the name of your TV program? Hello.
The TV show is called Breaking Barriers.
Nice.
And it was on RVN TV. I'm sure my old episodes are there. RVNTV.com. So if you want to check out some of my old stuff, Breaking Barriers is so go look at it. I found the TV show by accident. Because I was advocating for homeless female veterans. That's really kind of my passion. And I was, running all over town, locally and advocating, and came across someone who was part of my welcome home when I came home from Afghanistan. He said, "Oh, you're advocating for homeless female veterans. Used to talk to my friend. He has a TV show at the studio in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which was right near my house." And I reached out to him and said, "Hey, Dave told me to reach out to you." And he said, "Oh, I'd love to have you on my TV show." So I went to the studio, was on the show, and an article about me appeared in South Jersey Magazine. And a woman at the same TV studio saw me and messaged me, found me on Facebook and messaged me and said, "Hey, I have a TV show. I would love to have you on my TV show." So I said, "Great, sure." And that day, after the second appearance, the producer of that show, of the studio, actually approached me and he said, "Hey, you've got a great personality. You've got great energy. You should have your own show." And I said, "Well, what show?" I said, "I'm a nurse. I don't know anything about broadcasting, public, affairs, marketing." He's like, "You don't need to." He's like, "You just make up, a show name and, it's all, just be yourself and you find the guests and, we, broadcast it on our TV channel." I said, "Okay." Being someone who doesn't really, I'm not afraid to try new things. So I said, "Sure, this is a new adventure. Why not?" And Breaking Barriers was born. My boyfriend at the time and I kicked around a lot of show titles, and that's where we landed. And I said, "Great." And I brought it to Keith, the producer, and he said, "This is great." And he's like, "All right, here you go. And here's how you schedule your guests, and here's your times, and you'll just kind of show up with your guests and go from there." So I really enjoyed it. It was really great. I had a great time doing it. So I think that's where, what led me to do this. I thought, I can still have that. It's just a different format. I'm going to have to get over learning the technology.
Let's go back to the purpose, which is, advocating for female homeless veterans. And, I tell every veteran or anybody in general that if your podcast has a purpose, it's probably going to succeed at a much higher rate than if it doesn't. But a lot of people don't understand the scope of female homelessness amongst veterans. Can you kind of go into that for us, please?
Yeah, they're actually the fastest rising group of homeless in the country, faster than their male veteran counterparts and faster than their female civilian counterparts. And we do know that 70% of homeless female veterans are single mothers. And not that it's a problem per se, it just creates some logistics. Because if you've got children with you, now we have to be thinking about, okay, they have to be in school, and to be in school, they need certain immunizations to get into school. So we have to create the space. The problem is not a lot of states are set up for homeless female veterans, because you can't just put a woman veteran in a homeless shelter with men, and you certainly can't put her in a homeless shelter with men if she's got children with her.
Right.
And a lot of women veterans were going to the VA saying they're homeless and getting sent to places where doors didn't like, or lighting wasn't proper, or it wasn't set up for them and their children. So it really is quite a problem. And this really became my little passion project during the pandemic, and trying to reach out to like my local congressman and local other political officials and things, just trying to get the word out about this is a problem and we need to really address it. I was pleasantly surprised when I moved to Florida and found that they have a lot of resources down here for veterans, particularly homeless veterans, but they have a woman who is dedicated just to women veterans issues down here. And a friend of mine who lives in New Jersey, he's the family program manager for the Air National Guard in New Jersey. And one of the things that he and I were talking about is a lot of states have a lot of resources, and some more than others, obviously, depending on funding and size of your state. But one of the things that none of them do well is advertise the resources that they do have. So that's definitely something that I would love to see, some kind of, regional, meeting, so that we can then spread that in terms of, okay, how do we as a collective nation advertise and get resources out to our veterans who need it? Because even as I was living in New Jersey and I was running into people and I was networking, and I would find things out in drips and drabs. And I would say, why am I just finding this out now? And I've lived in this state and I've been in the military over 10 years. And now I'm finding out that these resources exist. Like, it just should be better advertised and marketed that there are these resources out there. We shouldn't have to dig for them so deeply.
So as you started your podcast, did you bring that purpose, into the podcast? Is that the basis for the guests you have? How do you structure your podcast to align with your purpose?
So I've gotten kind of away from not on purpose, but I want to advocate for homeless veterans, but I also want to be able to find the right guests to speak to what's going on here. And I feel like I need to find a couple different guests in that respect that are like maybe regional, so that we could kind of have like a round table. And I'm still kind of working on that. What I do for my guests is I kind of think of a show, that I want to do something about, and try to find a guest that fits that idea. A lot of times I see things on social media and I think, okay, this is a really interesting topic that we need to talk about, because I'm not afraid to talk about anything, and I'm kind of an open book. So they don't have to be veterans. I love my veterans, and if you have a story to tell, I'm happy to have you on my show, because I want to give you a voice and a space to talk about your story, particularly veterans who are involved in organizations that help other veterans, veteran-owned businesses, and also civilians who are overcoming the odds or doing great things in the community. So I have a variety of guests. Last year I had on Rock Rogue, who is now since retired from the Tampa Bay Veterans Day Parade. And there's a new board. And I actually just met someone from that new board at Honor Flight last week, and they have my card. I said, here's my card. I need to have you on my podcast so we can, start advertising for the Tampa Bay Veterans Day Parade. I go to Honor Flight, I volunteer with them, and I bring cards with me. And if I have somebody who wants to be on the podcast to tell their story, I do that. I had a friend on, she's a civilian, and she and I are both domestic violence survivors. And we did a show about what it was like to be in that relationship and get out of that relationship. And we're continuing the conversation this weekend, actually, to talk about, once we got out, how we moved forward. So it's all about, putting the basically good information out there, or bringing awareness to something so that people have perspective. Definitely something that I feel is missing in a lot of society today. Too much fighting, too much drama. I don't do drama. I don't do, junk on my podcast. And I don't do politics, because I'm still in the service and I really don't want to get in trouble and say something that I shouldn't. So, I have plenty of opinions. I just don't, mention them on the podcast or on my social media. But, I look for things that are interesting, things that are, new, or, maybe some people are afraid to talk about. My friend is a retired Army colonel, and we're both on different sides of, like abortion and politics. But he came on the show and we just talked about like just being a good leader and how do you deal with people that, maybe say something that, upsets you, and how we kind of, how can we be better humans and be better Christians. And we modeling the behavior basically of what we would like to see in the world going on around us.
What's it been like working with MBR? Because it was really cool, Kristen, when Joel got profiled by the VA. I mean, you know as well as I do that when the VA, has you do anything, you've attained a level of excellence, right? And we're all
Right.
part of that. What was that like seeing him do that? Because he's worked hard behind the scenes a whole lot.
Yeah, Joel works really hard to make sure that veterans have a voice. And, that's really something that I think we can't stress enough, is that having that space and to say what we need to say so that people understand us, because definitely we go through things that it's hard for us to describe. Maybe we don't want to describe. And Joel served, and Joel had, traumatic brain injury, and he's overcome a lot. And I think he is a testament to, I'm so excited. You hear the dog barking in the
No.
background? Okay, good. I think Joel is a testament to adapt and overcome, personally and professionally. And I think he's a visionary, and I think he's a great, role model. So if you're struggling with something, come to MBR, because he's going to help you and support you through the struggle, and he's going to give you a space to tell your story as well. And he's always checking on people, which
Yep.
I think is so nice. I was going through some stuff last year, and he's like, "Hey, Battle, I'm checking on you. You okay?" And it's like, "No, I'm fine. No, like I'm just really tired, or I'm just, I'm struggling, but I'm okay. Like I'm not going to do anything stupid." And it's like, "Okay, well, I'm here if you need anything." No, I know, and I appreciate that. And he has said some things to me that someone has said to him, and I won't, because it's not my story to tell. But I think it's just really, it must have been really hurtful and frustrating for him to have people say things to him and don't know his whole story. And because he really does work hard, given his circumstances.
For sure, 100%. And I really respected that. When he approached me about coming on to MBR, I'm like, I really don't do that. But, he's like, this is what I'm trying to do. And, I bought into what he's doing. And like I said earlier, it's so important that veterans have that voice. And, it was cool seeing, checking in on what you're doing, seeing what you're doing, and the purpose behind your podcast. And speaking of your podcast, what's the most enjoyable part of it for you? I'm gonna ask that first, and then I'm gonna ask the negative second. But what's the most enjoyable?
I just like connecting with other people and
Yeah.
giving people a space to talk about the things that they're passionate about. There's an organization here locally called True Defenders, and they're helping homeless veterans in the Tampa Bay region. And that made me feel good that I could give them a space to tell their story and get it out there. Like, they're here in this area and they're looking for help. And if you're looking for, a space in your life that, hey, I want to give back, here's one organization that's a possibility. There's another one around here called Paws of Courage. And they, as somebody who would like a service dog but can't have one right now because my current dog is crazy. You adopt a dog and then they train the dog that you have picked out, as opposed to a lot of organizations that just go, here's a dog for you. They kind of, reverse it, and you pick the dog and then they get you the training together, which I kind of like. And, I'm like, oh, somebody who wants to pick my own dog, I don't want one just handed to me. That appealed to me. Talking about the parade, I was involved in the Philadelphia Veterans Day parade, and, coming down here and knowing there's one down here, being able to talk about that, and, giving, especially giving people a voice who have a story to tell. I feel that, social media has kind of ruined a lot of social grace, but I want to use it in a positive format. And there's just some people out there who aren't aware of how many other people are struggling. And if I can give people a space to tell their story, and it makes just one person stop and go, oh, you know what? I've really got it good. I've got a roof over my head and food in my refrigerator and I can pay my bills, but there are other people who are struggling. Or, oh, I didn't know that we can, people with mental health issues can struggle in this way. And I should be more conscious and aware of, they're not just lazy. It's depression is a real thing and it doesn't look the same in everybody.
Right.
Perspective of what we go through as veterans when we're away from home, whether it's for 2 weeks or 6 months or a year, and coming home and reacclimating, and even though we are home, how things impact us, fireworks and loud noises and or too much noise, and the fall of Afghanistan, like that impacted a lot of us, even
Yeah,
though we
it
were
did.
here. That's something that even I still struggle describing how that made me feel.
That was a tough day. That was a tough day. I still, I called out a couple of recruiters. I was like, you told us, you're telling me to tell these kids we won't leave you behind. And that's precisely what happened. I mean, it was a tough one for me to get over. What are some of the challenges? I won't say negatives because it's all
Yeah.
good. What are some of the challenges of podcasting? Because some people just think, oh, well, you just hit record, get on the screen, just talk for, an hour. How hard is that?
Yeah, so the technology is the challenge, right? Like I said, I loved my TV show because I showed up and everybody did everything around me, but now I'm responsible for everything. But if you're not good with technology, you have to remember to like hit go live or hit record and get the timing with the commercials and coming back. And, you know, I'm in Florida and it's rainy season, and the Wi-Fi is pretty good, I have to say. But I was recording a couple months ago, and of course the power went out for literally 10 seconds, and it was while I was recording. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. And I learned how to edit with Adobe when I was in broadcasting school, and we use StreamYard for our platform with MBR. And I kind of messaged Joel and I said, listen, I was maybe 30 seconds of like nothing. And I don't know, it might take me an hour to fix it for 30 seconds. I don't think it's worth it. He's like, all right, listen, go into StreamYard and see if you can edit it. If you can, great. But if not, then we won't worry about it. And I said, okay, fine. I'm going to try. And it actually was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I was able to cut and edit out that time and blend it so that it was pretty smooth. So I was pretty proud of myself. But I think the technology is a struggle for sure. Managing everything, trying to read comments when you're live isn't necessarily hard, because then I have to do this, on with the glasses, off with the glasses things. I can't read without the glasses. And I want to be respectful of my guests and their time and listen to them. But I also want to, be grateful and appreciative of the guests who are listening and making comments in. I have had a couple comments on a show that I was like, oh, is that person being truthful or is this somebody trolling? So, you got to be careful. And for me, I love being in front of people. I love talking to people. So this was a challenge for me, just talking to people over the internet. That's why I like my TV show, because people were right in front of me.
Right.
So I felt a certain level of disconnect being on the internet. But I'm working through it. I'm getting, adjusted, and I've got some better equipment now, thanks to you and Joel, which was, I think, really helpful. And it was not as complicated as I thought it was going to be to set up the receiver and the mics. I was grateful for that. I was terrified at first. And I think beyond that, it's really just finding the guests. And that's really it. Like, I've got a lot of guests in my back pocket that want to be on, but it's, oh, well, the timing, or, oh, I'm, having surgery and I'm going to be out for not available for 6 weeks. But I like connecting with a lot of people on a lot of different things. Like 2 weeks ago, I had on Erin Luz Cotrero from She Should Run. It's an organization that encourages women to run for elected office. So that was a really fun conversation. My girlfriend's coming on next week, and we're going to talk about health and wellness and Arbonne products. So I like having the ability to be flexible and just put good information out there and also have some fun as well.
For sure, for sure. That's the thing. As long as it's fun, you're going to be all right. And, again, you have a purpose, you're going to that purpose, and you can be flexible with, it's your sandbox. You make the rules.
Right.
That's the best part of it. It's the best part of it. So, Kristin, this hour has just like flown by. Would you consider coming back on?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. So, but to stay on point, I gotta stay focused. How do I connect with your podcast and you and check it out?
So you can find me on Facebook, the Dog Tag Diva. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page as well. And you can email me at the Dog Tag Diva at mbradio.us. So I am on social media. So you can reach me that way. And the podcast airs Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on Military Broadcast Radio, MBR Talk, and the Dog Tag Diva Facebook page.
Fantastic. Look, I just always enjoy getting to talk to another podcaster. I understand the challenges and the different things. And the cool thing is everybody's different. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. And so, when I watch you're connecting with your guest and you're getting information out there, I'm like, she's doing it in a different way, but it's still very effective. But I could talk to that same person and get something else out of it. So there's plenty to go around, and I just like what you're doing. And thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for having me, Travis. I really appreciate it.
Well, there you go, folks. Kristin Leon of the Dog Tag Diva podcast. Really interesting, story of how this relationship aspect of her naval career allowed her to do nursing and other things. Military is a great place. So we're going to let her get back to being Oscar Mike. She's like a shark, folks. And Kristin, I'll see you next time. As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we're mission in flight.
Great. Thank you so much.
And cut. All right.
Remember, Honor teaches our mission. We care about it and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 for Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.